batia 4 horas de manhã, 4 horas de tarde. Comecei a sentir que a bola fazia realmente uma curva de 2 metros, 2 metros e meio.
Welcome to the 88th episode of Folha Seca. Today we are joined by Claudius Schäfer, CEO of the Swiss Super League and President of the European Leagues. Claudius, welcome to Folha Seca.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Pedro.
You joined the Swiss Football League, SFL, in 2006, serving as head of legal services and licensing for 6 years before ascending to the role of CEO. What unique perspective did that background give you that you probably couldn't have gained elsewhere in the organization?
Well, listen, it's I think for the job that I'm doing now, it's very useful to be a lawyer. For sure, you can have a different profession. You can come from economics. You can come from sports management. But you know what I lived in the first 6 years with some clubs, difficult situations, and I was also the head of the club licensing procedure, because in Switzerland it's the league doing the club licensing. Usually in most of the associations, it's the association. So with this I learned a lot, and sometimes very difficult situation, and that was like the best thing that could happen for me.
Since 2010, the Swiss title has been a virtual duopoly, broken only once by FC Zurich in 21-22. By contrast, for example, the Belgian league has crowned 6 different winners in that same period. While you argue that this dominance is driven by superior management, youth development, and smart transfer policies, the core issue is that as revenue from European competitions continues to grow, there's a risk that this financial divide becomes calcified, let's say. Is fostering greater competitive balance a strategic priority for the league? And if so, what specific measures is the league taking to close that gap?
But listen, competitive balance is I think for a league the most important thing, because without competitive balance, when you always have the same title holder as we experienced, that makes it difficult, you know. And I think what we are doing in the Swiss league is the money that we gain from television broadcasting, from the title sponsor, and that we are paying out to the clubs. We're doing it in a I would say a smooth way. We have a ratio of 1.8, so the clubs, they gain almost the same money, but we can only do this, let's be honest, because the TV money in Switzerland is quite low. If we would have, you know, the TV money of a big league, even of Portugal, for example, that would make it much more difficult, because we also have clubs like FC Basel, like Young Boys Bern, that are bigger than the others, that have more viewers on television, they have more fans in the stadium. But in the end, also for those two clubs, you know, the most important thing is to have a competitive league, because without the other 10 teams that they play with, they couldn't play. So they see it as very important that we pay out this money like we do, and I think this is a strong message.
But it's a tough balance, isn't it? Because, for instance, La Liga, we know that they increased a bit that ratio from the most well-paid club to the last one, also to compete with the Premier League, right? Like to try to make Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atletico de Madrid clubs that can compete in Europe. So, how do you see that, like the balance between keeping your domestic league balanced, but at the same time wanting the top clubs to go out to in Europe and earn more points?
You know, this is also in Switzerland is a big topic. But what you can say, you know, the big clubs in Switzerland usually they play internationally, and when they play internationally, they make more money in transfers, for example, because if a player plays Champions League, UEFA Champions League or a Conference League or a Europa League, uh, that for his own career, but also for the possibilities of the club. I mean, in financial terms, this is very important. So the clubs, they see it a little bit differently in the domestic league. They see that we need a championship with 12 clubs. They see that the smaller clubs, they don't have the possibilities that they have, and so that's why they have a big portion of solidarity. But in the end, for sure, you always have also in Switzerland two, three clubs. For them, it's very important to have international success.
Just to finish this chapter, Claudius, considering just the 1.8 ratio, why do you think that still there is this kind of these top clubs mastering competition, Basel, Young Boys, and here and there also FC Zurich?
I didn't get this question, so you don't.
Like even though you have these just small ratio, just small gap,
Yes.
still you have just this really strict group of big
Okay.
clubs winning the league. So why do you think this happens?
You see, that's what I said, that the broadcasting money in Switzerland and the money coming from centralized marketing, like the title sponsor, is quite low compared to other competitions in Europe. And Young Boys Bern, FC Basel, FC Zurich, FC St. Gallen, those clubs, they have full packed stadiums. They have, it's a difference when you play with 27,000 fans, 28,000 fans, like in Bern, compared to maybe a club like Lugano playing with 4,000 fans. So these are also clubs that have a big tradition. They have a big identification also in the region. Everybody goes to the stadium on the weekend, so that makes it those clubs a little bit more big than the others.
By the way, speaking about the stadium attendance, we were speaking about Portugal, Switzerland, and so on. I think it's a good comparison because the Portuguese league, you have this huge concentration of attendance, like almost two-thirds are attending the big three clubs, whereas in Switzerland, when we pick FC Zurich, Young Boys, Basel, it's roughly half of the stadium average attendance. Do you see this as an opportunity, the fact that it is much more balanced?
I think for Switzerland, the stadium attendance is the most important income source, and not only an income source, it's also about identification. And I think that's why we're really working on this. We have the fan engagement. We really want that the fans like to come to the stadiums, that they feel in security when it comes to the stadium. We just had our general assembly last week, and we showed to our clubs a research that we have done with the fans, and we showed the clubs what they can even do better. For example, also in having lunch at stadium, better food in stadium. So this is something very important, and you see it. And I think it's uh, in Portugal, it's about the same. That compared to the inhabitants in Switzerland, we have a very big attendance in our stadiums. I think that's probably after Portugal. But we are top five in Europe. When you compare our stadium attendance to the people living in Switzerland, it's even bigger than in the big leagues. So something you shouldn't forget that. And I think also in Portugal, the attendance is quite high.
Maybe you've already mentioned a couple of things, indirectly or directly, but you are naturally concerned that Switzerland is losing ground over the recent years in Europe. Compared to just a year ago, for instance, the league has been overtaken by Greece, Poland, Norway, and Denmark. Given that European qualification and avoiding, of course, tough qualifying grounds are financially critical, what specific measures are being adopted to ensure Switzerland doesn't fall further behind nations with similar structures? I'm thinking not only about redistribution of European revenue, solidarity among the Swiss league, but also like scheduling flexibility for Swiss teams competing in Europe, mandatory eventually natural grass pitches, infrastructure upgrades. Like, can you give us a bit a glimpse of what is being done?
Yeah. So what we introduced is for the playoffs that the clubs that are playing the playoffs for these three competitions, they can ask that we postpone the matches. In this round, that they have 1 week off, that they can really prepare for these playoff matches. But for the rest, it's quite difficult because we have 38 rounds that have to be played in Switzerland, and we have the winter break. So this is one topic. Another topic is what we are observing, that in this European ranking, some some leagues like ours, like Scotland, Norway, Denmark, they're always going up and then they're going down again, going up, going down. Because when you only have four teams in the competition, you can you can gain much more coefficient points. So probably that are my expectations, that we will go up again next year. Probably that will happen. But for the rest, I think these are very interesting points. About natural grass or artificial pitch. It's a constant discussion in Switzerland. We have artificial pitch. Those who have natural pitch, they don't like to play on it, and it's maybe for the European cause, it's not perfect. It's quite difficult because we have this weather topic also in Switzerland, with rainy weather, with cold weather. But it's something that we will discuss. And about redistribution, this is something that, for example, the Netherlands are doing. From those clubs that are competing in the European competitions, they give, I think, 5% to all the rest. We had discussions about this till now, and it was even a proposal of the league to do that. Till now, the clubs that they decided against. But I think this is something that we will rediscuss in the future, because the amounts that the clubs are gaining from UEFA competitions are becoming higher and higher.
And when it comes to the mindset, still speaking about Europe, you mentioned a couple of points. That on one hand, you mentioned that Swiss clubs must enter European competitions with a strong competitive mindset. So this is something that then I would like your thoughts on how could eventually the league support clubs in cultivating this psychological resilience, if this is possible. And on the other hand, you also maintain that solidarity payments from the Champions League campaign, for instance, uh, are even a game changer for the smaller teams, which sometimes I believe it's tough for them to see that, at least to see that on a daily basis. So my question for you is, how can the league support clubs cultivating that mindset? How can the league help smaller clubs understanding that they also take advantages of the top clubs' performance in Europe?
You know, this is we can do things, and there are things we can't do. So on every meeting, we're telling our clubs how important the UEFA competitions are for Switzerland. And because we had in the past some results that were not satisfied. When you lose as a Swiss club against a club that is ranked much lower than our clubs, we are not satisfied. If you lose against a club from Portugal or from Belgium, in the end, it's quite difficult to compete against those clubs because usually the budget are much higher than ours, and I think, but it has to go into the minds, and I think that is something that changed. That this is something very important for us, and the smaller clubs, what they can do. Um, they need to know that the European experience is extremely important, not only for the clubs but also for the players. That is what I mentioned. If you have like the international window for a player, it's completely different when you are only playing domestically. If you are shown on television, if the scouts are coming to the stadiums because you play internationally, then probably you can do a next transfer. And when you see, in there was just a study that came out 2 weeks ago that showed that when you take the last 10 years, Switzerland was very high in transfers of young players into the five big leagues. When you observe the last 3 years, it went a little bit down. That means that again we have to strengthen our everything that we can do, that our clubs play with young players. We also would like that they play with more Swiss players, to be honest, and that this is an asset that they can play on, and that's very important for us.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because this is always tough to discuss these things with someone with a lawyer background, even more because I'm not in the internal of the organization, of course. But I think that as it stands, the SFL's licensing framework is primarily solvency based, meaning that as long as an owner covers the losses, spending remains largely unrestricted. However, when we observe the European trend towards cost control mechanisms, such as, for instance, La Liga's strict squad cost limit, or even now the Premier League spending rules, what I would like to ask you is if the introduction of a stricter domestic financial fair play system is part of your strategic roadmap, specifically if you plan to implement rules that tie spending to actual revenue to ensure sustainability.
I wouldn't say that this is a top priority because we have a very strict licensing procedure. I think Switzerland was, if I'm not wrong, together with Austria and Germany, one of the first leagues or associations that introduced a domestic licensing procedure, meaning not only for the UEFA competitions, club competitions, but also domestically. So we do really quite a heavy check, and we compare it also to the to economy. Not to the football sector, but to the other economy, and there we can see that we have a very strict control because in the end these are limited companies that are in the open market, and we do a check that usually such a company doesn't have to fulfill. Now, we need then to check uh, the money that are is coming from owners, for example. Is it affecting our competition? Is it difficult then for other clubs without a certain owner that is injecting money into the club? Is this a problem? And I think till now it's not. We have different models. We have clubs like St. Gallen with many shareholders. Probably almost every fan is a shareholder, and then we have clubs like Sion where we have one shareholder. And Austria and Germany, they have the 50+1 rule, where 50+1 of the voting rights of a club need to be with the old association. Can we turn the wheel in Switzerland? No, we couldn't. If we would introduce this, I would say that we would end the season with maybe 7 or 8 clubs. So we have, when you know about the past, then you can say we have a quite a sustainable league, and changes in this direction will be difficult.
Why do you mention that you would end with 7 or 8 clubs? I didn't get that well.
If we would, for example, introduce a 50+1 rule, that 51% of a club have to be owned by the historical association, because in Switzerland it's possible that one person owns 100% of the shares. And if we would turn this wheel, if we would tell a club that wouldn't that will won't be possible in the future anymore, then we would probably lose this club.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the league was also pretty much impacted by Neuchâtel Xamac's collapse, right? Resulting in its bankruptcy in 2012. Uh, how difficult it is for you, even though you have all these licensing procedures, but do you still struggle with keeping pace with evolving investor tactics?
When we had the case of National Xamax and also FC Wil, where we had owners from Turkey that disappeared on Christmas, and the club was without owner, during the season. So that is when we introduced a tough licensing procedure for all the new owners. So if, as a club, you would like to sell your shares to a new owner, this owner has to to show or to come up with a bank guarantee covering one third of the annual budget of the club. So that makes it very difficult for a new owner, to step in, or it gives us not a guarantee, but almost a guarantee that on the financial base we know this club. And secondly, we have a tough fit and proper test, so we want to know who is coming, who is entering our league, and we're doing this with an external company. And we already had cases where we had to say no to new owners.
Yeah, yeah. While the Premier League has spent the last 5 years in a political battle to establish an independent regulator, as we've been speaking, the Swiss League has had an autonomous disciplinary commission with similar sanctioning powers for years. Uh, I think. I think this validates a bit the Swiss model of self regulation, doesn't it?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. I'm often asked, why are you doing also the disciplinary? And then I have to say, we're not doing it. It's an external commission. With a committee. With lawyers for the disciplinary committee, but we also have the club licensing committee, have our lawyers, have our economists, and usually this is done by the federation. In most of the cases, disciplinary committees is within the federation. We still have it. Sometimes that's right. It's not that easy because in the end, you support the club. You have all those big contracts with broadcasting, with the title sponsor. On the other hand, you control the clubs, and you also do the disciplinary. But I would say till now it worked quite well. So I wouldn't know why to change it.
Back in 2022, there was a proposal to introduce a playoff format featuring a title deciding finalissima aimed at boosting the emotion, excitement, and commercial value of the league. You championed this format, arguing for emotional intensity, but opposition from fans and the police, citing concerns over tradition and security, ultimately prevailed, shelving the idea before it could be implemented. Given that you consistently reject alarmism regarding stadium safety, do you still hold the view today that the playoff format would have been the superior model for the Swiss league?
I'm not thinking about it anymore. It's from the table. So we had a long procedure around a new format. I think, like many leagues that are looking deeply into their format and the model. In the end, we tried to have a change, and in the first vote, 16 out of 20 clubs were in favor, four were against. But then, you should have in those matters a stronger collaboration with the fans, because it happened in our case, as it happened with the Super League. In the end, the fans were completely against, because for the fans, one of the most important things is the sporting equity. So if a club, is number one, for example, 20 points ahead, then this club should be the Swiss champion. And we wanted to even play, best of three for the champion. So that would have made our format quite unique in Europe, a little bit like in the US. But again, the fans were completely against, and then you also had this security issue. We had talks, with the police, with the cities, and they were not telling us, you can do it, you can't do this new model. But we have some questions, and I think we answered those questions. But I have to be honest with myself, it would have meant uh, probably more risks, because you would have had these games in the end, first against second, crowded stadiums, about everything. So now we have another model. We play it with 12 clubs. We're quite happy, and the playoff model is done with the wind.
Do you think that, for instance, let's say an American style model of a closed league, do you see these as, do you think that the positive aspects of it would outweigh the negative ones?
No, I don't think so. I think Europe is not made for a closed league. Even that some clubs would wish it, because it gives them like financial certainty. This is always the you always have the risk. Even big clubs sometimes. I remember FC Zurich. Went down to second division, so that can happen. But this is that is what is on stake, and makes it very interesting. And I think in Europe, that's not the model that we're aiming for.
That's why in 23-24, as mentioned, you've decided to implement a new 38 round format, expanding to 12 teams, dividing the league in two at some point, with the championship group, the playoffs for the champion, and the relegation group, like kind of like following the Scottish model, let's say. For instance, now we see that the Belgian Pro League in 26-27 they will abolish playoffs and they will return to the regular format league. So again, just to insist, just once more in this question, are you truly convinced that the current format is the best to maximize the potential of the league over the coming years, or are you also willing to make any adjustments? How do you see that?
I think what you need as a league is stability. Now we have this model, this not new now, because we are in the third year now, in the third season, and with 12 clubs, it's quite difficult to find the perfect model. We had many proposals, but in the end, it's difficult. It's much more easy, with 18 teams, with 20 teams, you just play a very conservative model. But with 12 teams, we have 3 rounds. That is not perfect. It's not perfect. And then we have this split, six with the championship group, and 6 with the relegation group, where we play 5 matches. And in the end, it can be uneven. That is always the critical point. But again, you won't find the perfect model with 12. But we should now stay for some years with it, and then look into it maybe in 2 3 years, when we have more data, and maybe more clubs in the second division who could also play first Super League.
We were mentioning in the beginning of our conversation, we were speaking about the stadium attendance, and of course, that one of league's objectives is should be to enhance the in-stadium fan experience, which in turns will also improve the experience for viewers at home. Uh, and at the same time, it's always challenging, right, to increase let's say a relatively small number of attendees, as you mentioned, like Switzerland, Portugal, Belgium, the Netherlands. We are speaking about countries with small size countries, let's say. So, what concrete measures has the Swiss Super League implemented to improve the match day experience for spectators over the recent years?
That is what I just mentioned. What we are doing now is a yearly research, and we have around 20,000 fans that were responding our questionnaire, where we really, first of all, ask our fans what is good, what is maybe less good, what is not good in the stadium, and that we can learn, our clubs can learn. What we also changed it is that. we would like that the smaller clubs can learn from the bigger clubs, so that we are like a family, and that we have synergies, and that we can also maybe in the end all of the clubs can make more money, or save more money, but that we are doing things together, you know. And I think this is something very very important. The most important is the security aspect, you know, that those that are in the stadium, that they feel insecurity, that they like to come to the stadium with the kids, with the families. Now, the fan report also showed us that we only have 22% of women in the stadium. So this is something that our clubs yeah, need to know, and maybe, you know, to discuss some measures to attract more women to come to our stadiums. The thing is that in Switzerland, you know, we have also a second very big competition with ice hockey. Ice hockey is played between September and April, May, and it's played inside. So that is what we're observing, that more women, for example, are going to watch ice hockey because it's inside. Now we can't change this, you know. Unfortunately or fortunately, we're playing outside, but we I think this is the first thing is we need to know who is coming to our stadium and what can we do better in the future.
The engagement of the supporters that you were mentioning, I believe that maybe around 2017 at some point you were complaining about the low participation rates of the fans on these kind of projects. Do you feel that over the recent years supporters and fans, they've been each time more feeling that they are part of the growth of the Swiss football?
You know, with the fans, it's quite a difficult topic, because in the end, also, you know, when it comes to the format, for example, we always told our clubs, you need to discuss these topics with your fans, because we don't have a direct contact to the fans. But when I'm talking about these fans, for sure these are the fans in the stands, you know, the ultra fans. They are not really interested to have discussions with us, what I can also understand. But we do not only have the ultras in the stadium, and with other fans we have a quite closer contact, and I think it's the most important. These are our clients, or not our clients, but the clients of the clubs, and the clubs need to know what they can do better, that it attracts people coming to the stadium, because again, it is the most important income source in Switzerland. It's around 25-28% of all the income of a club's budget is from stadium attendance, you know. So you know, compared to broadcasting, this is around 7, maybe 8%. So you see what is the most important domain.
And we touched the hockey, you were mentioning it, and it's something that you frequently noted that the National League is ahead of football regarding, for instance, ticket sales digitalization. In Swiss ice hockey, both occupancy rates and digital adoption are exceptionally high, close to 100%, if I'm not mistaken. What best practices can the Swiss Football League adopt from the National League, not only in this regard, but also in other areas as well?
But listen, you know, we were working quite closely with the National Ice Hockey League during COVID, but that had other reasons, and we worked really well together. Now after COVID again, you know, they do their stuff, we do our stuff, you know. And I think when it comes to digitalization, we are super happy what we are doing. I think when you see the journey that we did in the past, is quite astonishing. I'm not that much observing ice hockey in this aspect. For sure, again, they have the full attendance in stadium, but it has also to do because they play, you know, during the weeks. And I would not like to change this, because we need the weekends in football. But the good thing is, you know, it attracts, for example, small companies, to invite all their people into the for the matches. That's sometimes more difficult in football because for companies and people working for companies, the weekend is mostly family time, and that is an asset that ice hockey has that we can't compete. But in the end, again, we're bigger than ice hockey. When you see, in Switzerland, I think around 20,000 people are playing ice hockey, all in all. And in football, you have completely different figures. We're between 300,000 and 400,000, so that makes us much more powerful. And I think what we have to make better in the future, is we have datas, we have addresses, but till now we were not working uh, good enough to use those datas. But as I said, we are now on a digital journey with innovation, and I'm sure that this will change in the future.
Also because with the, as you said, like not only the fact that families are more available in the weekends, but also probably in ice hockey they don't have the competition of the European UEFA's competitions, no?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is completely different. They have a Champions League, but I think they even lose money if they play in the Champions League. So because they need money for traveling, and this is completely different in Switzerland. Okay, what we have, they have their competitive balance because of this is you can say much better than in football. Because if in football a club is competing, for example, in the UEFA Champions League, as Young Boys did, not this season but last season, unfortunately they gained 0 points, but they made 35 million, and 35 million is much more than the whole league is receiving from broadcasting from domestic football.
Yeah, yeah. And regarding ticketing, because this was something that over the recent couple of years, this was something, a point of improvement, because you admitted that some clubs were still really dependent on the physical sale in the box office. Do you see an improvement in this side?
Yeah, listen, we just went out for tender for centralized ticketing, and this is, a main aspect. You need digital ticketing, not only, you know, you need also all the possibilities that the innovation is giving you regarding ticketing. But I think, we did a big step now, but we need to do even a bigger step. And I think when you see how, for example, the Belgium league did, they centralized the ticketing. Not all the clubs are participating, because sometimes you have long contracts with ticketing providers. But this is something that we see as a not it's a challenge, but what we see as a big opportunity for our clubs.
And also speaking about opportunities, there are a couple of points that I wanted to discuss with you. They are different, but on one hand, we have like back in 2022 when FIFA changed the loan regulations. So you considered back then that lots of clubs, for instance, the Italian clubs, they were making, let's say, an abusive use of these of loaning lots of players. So this is the first question that I want to ask you. Like, if you think this is an opportunities for small and medium-sized leagues, and on the other hand, you defend that Swiss clubs should stick to their DNA, to their regional and their local identity, instead of just do the same and be generic and global commercial products, since you feel that they would lose taking this road. So yeah, if you could just give your thoughts on these
Yeah,
both aspects.
I think it's a big step, and it's an important step that we gap the loans. If a loan contract has also the possibility to take over the player, then if definitively, then I think it can be a valuable step. That is what, for example, FC Basel did quite well in the past. Taking young players on loan, also from Portugal, for example, and then they could take them over after 6 months, and then they could sell them for a much bigger amount, maybe again 6 months later. But I think what we have to work on, and last week when we had the General Assembly of the league, we again told the clubs, identification is very important, but also our clubs are spending so much money for youth development. But in the end, we don't have enough Swiss players competing in our competitions. The Super League is a little bit more difficult because the clubs also would want to be internationally successful, but we need to form our second division into a youth development league where the clubs let young Swiss players play. At the moment, they make use of too old players, of too many foreign players that in the end are not helping the league and the clubs to grow.
You advocated for integrating the under 21 teams into the Challenge League structure, so the second division, the second tier of the Swiss football system, arguing that playing in a separate reserves league like in England was inferior and that young talents needed the intensity of the second professional tier. However, today under 21 teams remain capped at the promotion league level and are ineligible for promotion. So, with that pathway remaining closed, do you believe the progression of top prospects from Swiss football is being delayed, or that their potential is ultimately going to waste?
Listen, what we need is a change of mentality for the second division. You can let the under 21 teams playing in the second division will cost a lot of money, to promote to the second division. I know from also bigger clubs that they don't really have an interest in it because they think, under 21, that's too old. We have to invest when the players are 16, 17, 18 years old, and they need to play in the second division. And you can, you can go up to, that was the intention of some clubs, to go to 16, 18, 20 in the second division. But when you don't have this change of mind, we won't realize our objectives. We need a change of mentality. We need the clubs to not only form the players but to let them play the second division. And when we are now comparing, with leagues that are a little bit similar than ours, I take Denmark, I take Austria. I think they did well in the past. They have much more domestic players playing in their leagues, second leagues, and that's why we're working on this project high level and with a lot of speed, because you know you can now say the under 17 national team was quite successful. We unfortunately lost against a nation called Portugal, but we've seen the under 19 team losing at home 0-7 against Denmark. So we need to change something, and this is what I just told you. We need a change of mentality.
When you say that it would cost a lot of money, is it essentially because of the licensing requirements of the stadium infrastructures and such?
What do you mean? I didn't get
Like
this.
when you mentioned, for instance, that even the top clubs, the bigger clubs, they wouldn't be interested actually in getting their under 21 teams like promoted to the Challenge League, as it would cost lots of money.
Yeah, what they are saying is probably we need to strengthen the even younger teams, or just individual players, that can then be loaned out from Super League teams to Challenge League teams, but that there is like a guarantee that they play. you know there was also an interest from some Super League clubs, to invest in Challenge League clubs to take shares, but that's impossible because then you have the difficult situation if one of the clubs would like to promote. that has shareholders from the first division, from the Super League, that would make it quite impossible for our leagues. That's why we need to support challenge league clubs, maybe by paying more money to those clubs investing in young players, or letting young players play. We have a youth trophy where clubs from the second division, from the Challenge League, they gain quite a lot of money if they let play young Swiss players. But till now, it was not really successful. Even this season, even that we went up with the amount of money that we're paying to the clubs, we only have around 3 clubs out of 10 where we say that's successful, we're happy. But then we have 7 clubs where we are unhappy. That is why we have to change something.
Would it be correct or not to say that strategically speaking, the Swiss Super League would be, let's say, the commercial flagship pointing at the UEFA top 10 coefficient, while the Challenge League would be a development league essentially focused on developing the best national talents? Or
Yes. So focusing on the top 10, I on one hand I like it. On the other hand, I have to be realistic. It's maybe top 12, not top 10.
Mhm.
And then for sure, for the second division, for the Challenge League, it needs to be a development league, but also a professional league. You could say, okay, let's make out of it a league with 20 teams, with, as you said, under 21 teams competing in this league. But we also have these traditional second division teams, and they would like, they see their place in the second division, not in the first division, in the Super League. So that is something that we have to keep in mind. That's why we say it's a professional league, but with the objective to develop young players.
Yeah. For everything that we've been speaking, we know that the risk of cannibalization is pretty real with UEFA competitions midweek. So in mid 2024, the Swiss Super League and Blue Sport renewed their media rights partnership for the 2025 and 2030 cycle. It was reported back then that the deal's total value suffered a 10% decrease compared to the previous cycle. It's a universal challenge, as we know, shared even by the Big Five as they struggle to keep pace with the Premier League. With that in mind, what's the Swiss League doing differently to reverse this trend and try and maximize the value of the next right cycle? Even though
Yeah.
this has still started, of course. But
No, but that's a very good question, and that is, as you said, as you mentioned it, it's something that many leagues are facing now. Just our neighbors from Austria, they went to the market a few months ago, and now they are between 20 and 30% less. What we heard from the market. So that's a big topic, and it's in the end one part of the reason, probably the biggest part, is because we have now UEFA competitions with a lot more matches that became much more expensive for the broadcasters. So what we need to do is to prepare ourselves for the next tender. That is, and we have a 5 years contract. So we have the good thing is we have a national partner. We just heard today, from Belgium, that the zone wants to go out of the contract. We know they did the same in France. So probably we, in having a Swiss partner, Swisscom, Blue is a company of Swisscom, a very big Swiss company where the major shareholder is still the Swiss Confederation, so the Swiss government, that gives us some guarantee. But again, we will prepare, and we try to do a first step. We have our OTT platform for the international games outside Switzerland and the neighboring countries. I think we were the first league doing this in Europe. We are now in the second season, and the figures are going up, 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 and like this. not, these are not the big figures like the big leagues, but we're learning. I think this is the most important thing. We're learning, and we're gaining data. We see what we can do, and that is how we will prepare for the next step.
Are you certain that the change of the league format for following the Scottish model we were speaking about, splitting the league, are you pretty convinced that either in terms of stadium attendance but also in terms of viewership that the values were positively impacted, or the change is still not well noticed?
When it comes to broadcasting, I think either you want the Swiss league or you don't want it. It doesn't depend if you have 10 clubs or 12 clubs, what kind of format you're playing. The stadium attendance is really well, but probably we would have not the same because we would have two clubs less. But with 10 clubs, we also had a big intensity. So I don't think that this is the big topic. It's sometimes it's said that this is highly influential. I don't think so.
Yeah, yeah. Making it really simple and having Switzerland roughly 0.4% of Europe's land area and roughly 1.2% of the continent's population, given this kind of scale, uh, how can a league compete, to be the preferred option instead of a different league, instead of entertainment options such as movies or series? How is it possible?
In the end, we're selling the best product worldwide. Football is still number one for sure. When we see young people, doing streaming, going to Netflix, so that is something that we have to keep in mind and to be innovative with social media, with gamification, with fantasy games. We have to attract young people, and we also learned it from this questionnaire that we were sending out to our fans. When it comes to the stadium attendance, you see that the average age in the stadium is quite high, and this is something that we need to change. There won't be a revolution. Against competing against the streaming services is quite difficult. Competing against international club competitions is quite difficult, but we need to do it with identification, with Swissness, uh, and to see what we can do for young people.
A few years back, you were mentioning Netflix. A few years back, I believe you referenced at some point the idea of a centralized digital hub for the league's content, something along the lines of the Netflix of Swiss football. With the new media rights cycle now, the 25-30 underway, has this direct to consumer ambition been realized, or has the strategy shifted towards delegating that digital relationship entirely to your broadcast partners?
We what we did, as I told you, for the international right, we did the OTT platform. So this is direct to consumer. For the national football, we still have the broadcasting on pay TV, but we something that was very important for us, and I think this is quite unique also in Europe, that we have one game per week on the free TV, on the state TV. Uh, in many leagues, you have football only in pay TV, and this is something that for the moment we wanted to still have. That is also for the growth of the product. You still see in the public television, you have a lot more viewers for sure because it's for free. You don't need to have a subscription. It's very important for the sponsors, and I think till now that was important. For the rest, when it comes to digital assets, for sure, direct to consumer, we're working in gamification, fantasy games. We are now building our CRM. We're working together with clubs. Now we have, I think, around 800,000 addresses. That is quite a lot, and we're working on it.
When you transmit this match on a public channel, are you convinced that this doesn't affect at all, the media rights value or your attendance over TV?
You know, that's a good question. In the end, we decided to still have this one single game on public television because our title sponsor, our sponsors, for them, it was very important to still have it. Um, in the constellation that we have at the moment, I don't think that we would have gained much more from pay TV without this game in public television. So that's why, in the end, we decided to keep it.
And you already mentioned more the young attendance. How can you leverage social media in that sense? Like, of course, specifically highlights on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram.
That was a big project for us because in the end we have 18 people working for the league, so we are not a big company. But here we have a contract with an external company who is doing social media for us. We are on all the channels, but in the end, this is even much more important for the clubs because they have the players, they have the matches, uh, they have the crazy stories. We are the organizer as a league. What we can do over social media is interesting content, but it's not the content. So what we can do is maybe not for the big clubs because they started with this few years ago, but for the smaller clubs to give them advice. How could you do it? Let's do it together. Let's give them some content for their social media for the smaller clubs. But in the end, it's something that is on top of the priority list for the big club, for our clubs. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're totally right because this is not the content, and I guess this what I will ask now is a multi-million-dollar question. But what I want to ask you is, of course, while attracting interest with immediate content is important, like through these highlights, through these social media channels, but still, like, how does the Swiss league plan to convert those users, especially the younger ones, from watching short clips to turning in for the full match on TV?
Yeah, that's the big question. That's the big question. But first of all, we want to have them in the stadium, and here the thing that you can do is to show how this is a beautiful experience. To be in a stadium. I still think maybe not only football but sport is the most emotional, positively most emotional event. And if you are once in a football stadium, then probably you will go a second time. Okay, if it's a boring game, it's maybe more difficult. But usually, there are emotions. It's you are there with the friends, and that is something that we always have to show. We just did a big image campaign where we have been on all the channels, social media, online, but also on the walls. In the train stations, where it was just the objective to show the emotional part of the game. And let's try to move those young people into the stadiums. But it's a big challenge. You see what schools are doing, what the government is doing, that young people are going out of their apartment, that they're going, okay, it's nice to play our games in a video game, but that's not the only thing. The most important part of it is let's go watch the games in the stadium.
You just mentioned also the fact that you have 17 people, right, working for the SFL. Do you feel that sometimes you could be understaffed in some fields, or you believe that this is really the current dimension of the league?
You have to be careful because in the end we're working with the money of the clubs. They are our members. They like give us their money that we can work for them. So we always have to be careful. The good thing is, when we had this deduction or this, I mean, a little bit less, more attractive broadcasting contract, the club still decided that we go with the same organization because they believe in the league. They see what we are doing, and all my people are working 100% for the clubs, and we have a strategy. I think when we worked on our strategy was in 23 or 22. I was asking many of my colleagues of the leagues, of other leagues, domestic leagues, can you send me your strategy? And what was the answer usually? It's difficult, to find our strategy, or we had discussions about it, but it's not on paper. We have our strategy, and we're working 100% in this line. It's a strategy going from 23 to 27. And one of the most important topics of this strategy is synergy. That we want to see, or we checked, what can we as a league do for our clubs, where then the clubs don't have costs but can gain more money out of it. And I think this is in the end the objective. And for sure, I could always would like to have more people, but I'm happy with the people that I have.
Also relating with this, you reject the notion of the league acting merely as a policeman or a bureaucratic entity. You claim that you are not there just to regulate, but to develop. In your view, the SFL exists to generate value for the clubs, which is precisely why you have specialists in key areas like legal affairs and licensing and others. So basically, as you just mentioned, so you should be a strategic business partner to all the clubs, and developing specific projects also to ensure their business model is viable. Could you elaborate a bit on what kind of projects these are and how they've been developing through times? What are the projects, more the main ones?
I just can tell you about our strategy. In our strategy, we have 11 different strategic topics, and that starts from security, because in the end, security was in the last 2 years quite a hot topic in Switzerland, because we had some, not many, but we had some security issues, not inside the stadiums but outside the stadiums. Then for sure, innovation is one big part. One big part is youth development, as I just mentioned, or that we had a discussion on it, because in the end, Switzerland was seen for many years as one of the leaders worldwide in youth development, and I think we have to regain this position. So this is very, very important. Fan development, that we are listening to our fans, what they like, what should we do. This is one very hot and important topic. But also in the end, that we are a stable partner for the clubs, that we have a legal department that is helping our clubs, if they have some problems, that we are a stable partner for the clubs. And in these 11 different topics, we then have always no objective. We have how can I say, we want to measure it. If we
KPIs.
are we have, for all the objective, we have KPIs, and then we have around 90 actions for this 5 years plan. And we're really working alongside the strategy, the objectives, the KPIs, and the actions.
And is the knowledge transfer between domestic clubs something you've been chasing, like through workshops, networking events? Is the league also active in this sense or not?
Yes, all my managers, all those from the executive board, they have their own working group. So we have a working group in security. we have one in innovation, we have one in finances, we have one in legal, and so in these groups you have the specialists of the clubs and you have the staff of the league, and they try, to work alongside this strategy, but also to discuss actions, to discuss measures, to discuss opinions from clubs. You also have, in all the topics, you have some leading clubs, clubs that did a lot of projects in these domains, clubs that then can learn. So I think this is something we completely changed our mindset from, or how can I say, um, we tell our clubs, and they fully agree, you compete on the pitch, around the pitch we work together.
Yeah, yeah. We touched on your path at the SFL earlier, but you've also been a member of the Council of the Swiss Football Association, the SFV, since 2010, and an executive committee member since 2019. You've stated that there aren't many overlapping points between the SFL and the SFV, given that the league focuses exclusively on the top two professional tiers, while the association manages, for instance, the national team, amateur football, Swiss Cup. Despite this structural separation, what synergies exist between the two entities, and on which strategic fronts is alignment essential for the overall health of Swiss football?
I think it's essential that a league, a professional league, and an FA have a very close collaboration. And we are really very happy that we can now that our candidate, for the presidency was elected, Patrick Nebel, who has a big experience in club football, in youth development, in FA and FA management, and there are a lot of points that we have in common. Uh, we also want to have a successful national team. The a national team is, in the end, you can say, the cash cow of the FA. We need a successful national team. We need a successful Swiss Cup, because the Swiss Cup is organized by the FA. We want to have a close collaboration for youth development, because in the end, our clubs, they have the top of the youth teams, but then you have all the kids. This is organized by the FA, so we need to work very closely, and I think that is something we're doing, since not only since the new president was elected, but also from before. And in the end, we want to be successfully together, and we have also big opportunities when it comes to data. uh, when you see the possibilities that we have with the reach that Swiss football has, we have the same reach as big newspapers in Switzerland or big media houses in Switzerland. But till now, we gave away almost all our content. So I think in the future we need to concentrate together on all the aspects of collecting data, collecting also, from the youth teams to the a national team, all the matches, um, because there we have big opportunities.
And going back to the beginning of our conversation, you served on the board of the European League since 2015, and you've been vice president since 2023, being in the beginning of the current year appointed as the president of the European Leagues. Your mission is to represent the interests of the leagues, mainly the medium and small ones, ensuring sustainable development in an ecosystem you argue that has long benefited only the biggest clubs. Something that you've identified financial polarization and governance as your two main battlegrounds, which is evidenced by the massive inequality within UEFA's Club Competitions Committee, where the European leagues hold just one seat against roughly 15 from clubs and delegates. And I guess that this demonstrates the challenge to secure fair distribution, a principle we insist must now extend to the entire ecosystem. after this long question, having this clear roadmap in mind, what's the ultimate goal for your mandate ending in 2029?
But listen, here I just can tell you about the mission of the European leagues, and the mission is quite simple. This is to protect, but not only to protect, but also to enhance competitive balance in the domestic leagues. And that is something that we're working on for many years. But now you have this financial polarization, with a few big clubs that are going in one direction, and then you have the rest going into the other direction. And so this is we are working on it. We're working more closely with UEFA than before. For the existing cycle, that was for the first time I would say that we had a word to say about solidarity. But when you see this financial polarization, you see that probably we need a complete new discussion about distribution, because if not, these two worlds are so far away from each other. And you saw what happened in the Swiss league, in the Austrian league, now in the Belgium league, in the French league, that, for example, broadcasting money is going down and is really hurting the domestic competitions. And that is something that we have to work on.
We speak about UEFA, but also like the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup, right? Because as you said, like just Chelsea and PSG, they received a payout equal to roughly 3,500 smaller clubs, so combined, which shows the big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big topic. Just when you hear, I'm not a socialist. I'm not saying that everybody should gain the same money. For sure, the biggest clubs that are participating in the UEFA Champions League, in this Club World Cup, they should gain more money than the rest. I'm not questioning that, but um, when it starts hurting the domestic competitions, we need to react, and we need to correct this. And I always can come up, with my own example of Switzerland, because when UEFA Solidarity money went up by 3%, from 4 to 7%, or maybe with the qualification rounds to 10%, um, that was quite some money, but I can't fulfill the gap that I have now because I have less domestic money, you know. And that was in the end not the objective. The objective was to have in the whole amount more than before. And now, when no club from Switzerland is playing in the UEFA Champions League, we gain less. So we have a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Also, I think one thing important to mention is that in 2024, European leagues and FIFA Pro filed a complaint against FIFA, and this was because after years of neglected dialogue, legal action became the only way to secure a seat at the table. So this is given this high stakes environment. I would like to ask you what would be your key negotiation principles when it comes to deal with powerhouses such as FIFA and UEFA.
But in the end, the first step is always to have discussions and negotiations. But when you can't sit on the table, then you won't have negotiations. You even won't have discussions. And in the end, the domestic leagues, we are a 20 billion industry, and we are a 20 billion industry that is not hurt when it comes, for example, to the international scheduling. And that's why, in the end, the only way was to go to the European Commission. It's not that we want money from FIFA, from the big institution. We're not against FIFA. They are the world regulator, but we need to sit on the table for the decisions that are affecting us. Point.
Yeah, and like I asked also to Ian de Jong in the recent talk, what do you think is what gives Switzerland and the Swiss football that competitive edge to overcome competition in the goal of reaching and keeping a spot in the top 12 in the UEFA coefficient?
It's a difficult question, you know. In the end, it's becoming always more difficult. In the past, you know, it was easier for Swiss clubs to gain young talents abroad. Mohamed Salah, for example. I'm questioning if we could have a same player in Switzerland that was not observed before by now other scouts, you know, big teams from maybe leagues that are a little bit bigger than ours, like Portugal, like Belgium. So that makes it difficult, and that's why again, youth development in Switzerland is the most important, one of the most important topics. And you know, it costs a lot of money. Clubs are spending so much money for youth development, but in the end, they need to bring those players. They need to give those players the chance to play. And then when we have stronger stronger Swiss players, you know, that were developed in Switzerland, I think that we can attack this position.
When we mention competitive edge, in the end of the day, I believe that we are speaking about strengths. But if we look at the SWOT analysis, what would you say if you need to sum the opportunities and the threats of the Swiss Super League up? What would you point out?
So the opportunity that we have is that, you know, Switzerland is usually voted as the most innovative country in Europe. So this is something that we have a lot of young small companies, startups that we need to work together with them, because we can be a first mover in innovation. Secondly, in Switzerland, the identification with with the football clubs is quite high. For sure, you also have teams that are owned by foreign owners. That is then more the risk side, that you don't have this identification, but they are part of the Swiss league, and sometimes it's even working well. I think in Switzerland, football is still by far sport number one. So we still have a high opportunity to gain sponsoring money, to have media income. But again, we have to be innovative. And then we have youth development, we have highly qualified coaches, we have a highly qualified education system in Switzerland. And let's take out the profit of it. For the risks, okay, security sometimes is a risk. You know, when you have, last year we had one, two, three games where outside of the stadiums we had some fights, and for the image of football, that is very difficult. Sponsors are then telling you it's too risky for me to invest in football. So this is maybe one of the risks.
Claudius, because the good conversations fly, would you have any recommendations as a final note for a book, series, documentary, or film about sports management or football in general?
No. And you know why? Just, go to the stadium. D- You don't need only to watch the game, but watch what is around the game. I always sometimes take my daughter into the stadium, and she's always telling me, I'm not so interested about what's happening on the pitch. I'm much more interested what's happening around the pitch. And I think if you go through the stadium with open eyes, you can maybe learn much more than reading a theoretical management book.
Claudius, thanks once again for joining and sharing your perspective on a range of important topics.
I very much appreciate it, and thank you very much for the professional questions.
For everyone just watching or listening to us, you can always subscribe Folha Seca channel on YouTube, or also following Folha Seca on the streaming audio podcasts channels such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thanks everyone.